Hey friends, thanks for joining us for today's worship service here at Crossroads Church. I'm so grateful that you've dropped by. Chat right there where you are online and connect with us. Let us know how we can serve you. If you want to see the full service, go to our website, hope@crossroads.org. hope@crossroads.org. Let's get started with our service today.
Thank you. All right, I hope you were watching closely because now we're going to stand and do the motions to that last one. I want to see some of you guys do that when Joey's leading worship next Sunday, jumping around from side to side. I want you to get into the worship. We could learn a lot from our kids when it comes into worship. So, hey, I'm so glad you're here. If you've got your Bible, turn to Genesis chapter 37. Genesis chapter 37. While you're turning there, let me say a great big thank you again to our families. If you're here visiting and you have children in our weekday program, you're our honored guest today, and we're glad that you're here. And we can do this more than one Sunday a year. I regret we missed it last year because of COVID, but we're glad you're here. Also, let me say thank you for those of you who came out last Sunday night for the Jason Gray concert. We had a great time, and glad that he came to share his music and ministry with us. Genesis chapter 37. We're going to read it in a minute, but it's interesting, God's timing, that today we're going to be talking about dreaming. And it's weekday Sunday. How appropriate. Talk about dreaming. I remember when I was a kid, I had a lot of dreams. My first dream was I wanted to be Batman. And then my mom and dad said, that job's already taken. You can't be Batman. So I wasn't able to do that. But it's amazing the opportunity that we have in this country to dream. And we're grateful for that. If you're a parent, grandparent, an influencer of kids, it's great to ask kids questions and hear what they want to be when they grow up. There are some parts of the world where places like the Dominican Republic, Malawi, places some of you have been, you ask kids what they want to be when they grow up or if they have dreams, and they say that we don't have dreams because they're just trying to get through tomorrow. They don't dream. But we get to this story in the Bible, Genesis chapter 37, and we encounter someone who's a dreamer. So I love this that we're talking about this today. Let's read it together, just the first 18 verses or so, 19 verses. Jacob lived in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. These are the records of the generations of Jacob. We're going to get into our story today of the life of Joseph. And Joseph, it says, he was 17 years old. He was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. Now let's get the picture here. 17 years of age, he's out, he's working, he's shepherding. Something happens, we don't know, but apparently his brothers were misbehaving, and he comes back to tell Daddy, I got to tell you, my brothers, what they did. So he comes back and he gives a bad report. In verse 3, Israel loved Joseph more than all of his sons. And don't forget, that's Jacob. God changed Jacob's name to Israel. And you'll see it kind of go back and forth. So he's still talking about Jacob here. And he says, Israel loved Jacob because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a vari-colored tunic. Now let's stop again real quick, because I did some more research. This study has been great for Pastor Jack, if not for you. I've read Genesis through many times, but even this time I'm learning new things. And one of the new things that I learned was vari-colored tunic, the coat of many colors. Some of you have heard that story. That was true. It probably was very colorful. But one of the things that made this coat very unique that we don't read about, you have to go back and study the Hebrew culture, was this coat actually had long sleeves. And it was more like a robe. It had long sleeves, and it went down to his ankles. And the other brothers didn't get that kind of coat. The other brothers got the sleeveless jacket. The first muscle shirts were in the book of Genesis. You may not know that, but they were. They were sleeveless jackets. They were very short because those people who wore those coats were the laborers. Those were the working guys. So for whatever reason, maybe God did this in foreshadowing who Joseph was to become. Also because of the love of his father, Joseph had on not only multicolored, but a long sleeve tunic. And so even his brothers, when they looked at him, saw him dressed differently. It did not make them happy. And we read about that in the next verse. Verse 4, his brothers saw their father loved him more than all his brothers, and so they hated him, and they would not speak to him, even on the friendly terms. And Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. And here's what he said to them: "Listen to this dream I've had. For behold, we were out binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose up and also stood erect, and behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to me, to my sheaf." And his brothers said to him, "Are you actually going to reign over us? Are you really going to rule over us?" They were beginning to think through this dream what he was saying, and they heard him even more. They hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. And then he had another dream, and he related it to his brothers and says, "Lo, I have had still another dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." And he related it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What's this dream you've had? Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come to bow ourselves down before you to the ground?" Let's stop right there. Rachel, his mom, has passed away. So Joseph is even saying this dream that he's had is that one day all of his relatives will bow down before him. She's passed away. She's not a part of the picture. And his brothers were jealous of him, verse 11, but his father kept this saying in mind. And his brothers went to pasture their father's flocks in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send you to them." And he said, "I'll go." And he said to him, "Go now and see about the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock, and bring word back to me." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Shechem, by the way, was about 60 miles from home. He didn't get into his Honda Accord and make the journey. It was a long walk, probably 20 hours of travel. And when he gets there, verse 15, a man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, "What are you looking for?" And he said to him, "I'm looking for my brothers. Tell me where they are pasturing the flock." And the man said, "They've moved from here. I heard him say, 'Let's go to Dothan, Alabama.'" No, I added that part. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. And Dothan, by the way, is 30 miles further away from home. So now at this point, he's going to travel 90 miles away from home. No mama, no daddy. All away from home with his siblings. And when they saw him from a distance, verse 18, and before he came close to them, they plotted against him to put him to death. And they said to one another, "Here comes the dreamer." I love that. We'll stop right there for a minute. Here comes the dreamer. Joseph is known as a dreamer. And I think one of the great enemies, or one of the great tools of the enemy, one of the greatest squelches of the enemy, is not allowing God's people to dream. Not to imagine what could be. Not to imagine the future. And sometimes the present, there's things going on in the present that are so challenging, and we're in those days right now in our world, that sometimes it's hard to dream about the future. I would encourage you, dream, dream, dream. Because God is a visionary. God is about the future, and God puts dreams in people's hearts even till today. God is all about dreams, and He gives Joseph this dream, and we find out here this shepherd boy is, whose brothers are totally jealous of him. God gives to him a dream. Now you got to notice that he didn't set himself aside, even though we're going to talk about this in a second. From his comments, seemed to set him aside as being better than his brothers. He was still working. He was still a shepherd. He was still out in the field. And it reminds me that those of people in our culture who are trained to do nothing are most likely to be good for nothing. He was still working. I know in our world today, some people think manual labor is the governor of Mexico. Manual labor is work. Work is a good thing. We studied earlier in the book of Genesis that God wanted us to work. Our job, even before the fall of man, was to work and to tend the garden and to be about work. And so Joseph and his brothers, that's their job. They're supposed to be working. Now, what is it about Joseph that makes him so special? We're going to start to figure those things out this week and over the next few weeks. I want you to think about this as I was studying. Do you understand 1/4 of the book of Genesis is about Joseph? 1/4. If you go back in early Genesis and you study creation, there's one passing comment when we read about creation where it says that God made the stars also. So there's this one passing comment about the galaxies in the universe. Oh, he just made the stars also. And yet there is 25% of the book of Genesis talking about Joseph. I think Joseph may be a very important person that we need to know about if God spends that much time telling us through his word about Joseph. And one of the things that we'll discover about Joseph that I love and that I can learn from, and maybe you can learn from today, is at no point in his years of 110 years of life did he ever seem to get his eyes off of Jesus. Adversity did not harden him. Adversity actually made him better. Adversity made his character. He became prosperous. We're going to study about that in the next few weeks. And prosperity did not even ruin him. He was the same guy in public as he was in private. He really was a great man, and we can learn a lot of things from him, and we can learn a few things about dreaming. He was loved by his dad more than all of his siblings. So what can we learn about this man, Joseph? What can we learn about dreams? Well, we all have ideas and we have dreams. And you may be here today and you may feel like, well, I can't have a lot of great dreams because if you knew about my family or you knew about where I come from or what side of the tracks I grew up on or you knew about my education, Pastor Jack, you'd say, no, I am disqualified from dreaming. Have you really studied the life of Joseph? Do you know his background? Do you know what kind of family he came from? I mean, you're talking about a family with problems and issues. We've been talking about it. We've studied it. He came from his mom and dad alone were deceitful. They lied. They went about this whole stealing of the birthright. We read about that and studied about that just last week. They were stealing. There was deception. There was lying. It was one big messed up family. And yet out of that messed up family comes this guy who's a dreamer. So you know what that tells me? It tells me that I don't give up on my dreams just because of my past. That's the first thing we can learn. Don't give up on your dreams because of your past. Maybe you're here today and you're kind of blaming your past and saying, you know what, that kind of disqualifies me from being able to have a great future. Some of you in this room have had great challenges with your family. Some of you come from some very challenging